So we're on episode 35.
We are.
So yeah, we're getting through them actually, aren't we?
We are, yeah.
Mind you, I was listening to a podcast. They're now on something like 300 and something, and they started theirs right at the start of the pandemic.
Oh, did they?
So yeah, we've got a few to
catch
up, but you know. So what have we been up to this week?
Well, so you've been a bit busier than me, haven't you, this week?
Yeah. So
we've had a couple of new clients. So I've been dealing with those and to and fro and sorting out what we're doing with them and getting dates and things sorted out with them. But you've been all over the place. You went from where we are in Cheshire, the two furthest full of racing circuits in the UK from us.
Yeah. So
in 48 hours. Didn't you,
I was down in at Snetterton, Norfolk. So I was there with a client who's just got a GT4 actually. Now he's not bothered about getting the RS. He had a GTS beforehand, but this GT4 is really quite special. So it's had the gear ratios changed, so they're much shorter. So it was kind of a complaint with the manual before, wasn't it? That some people were finding it was like quite tall geared. Yeah. So you'd spend a lot of the time in sort of second and third and wouldn't really need any other gears on the road. So he's actually had that done and had some special stuff done by RPM on the suspension as well, and it's really lovely car. So yeah, his first time out in it, but we were on Sport Cup 2 tyres in the wet initially, so that was an introduction. But it was dry in the afternoon, so actually it was really good for him to see the difference between Sport Cup 2s, you know, when it's below 7 degrees and it's wet, the difference in grip to when it's dry and a bit warmer. So we got to actually explore both. I think it will help him appreciate if he's going to use it over the winter. I mean, he probably won't that much, but he does like to do driving tours and that kind of thing as well as his track stuff. So it just gives him an idea of really the difference in the tyre technology, really. But no, it was good. It was great. I think he's realised what all the fuss about with GT cars. They're very different, aren't they, in their DNA?
Especially when you get them on track.
Yeah, I always say a GT car is really a race car for the road. All the other models are road cars that you can take on the track. It's like that DNA is just slightly different. So it was great to do that. And then, I ended up having to come back up and then drive to Knockhill in Scotland for Formula Women. So it was our second event, but still the first wave. So I'm a judge on Formula Women. We've got, I think in total, there's something like, 500 or something that we're assessing for the first wave. And only 50 will go through to the second stage. But it does, the first wave will go on for quite a while. We've got Bedford yet to do, 2 days at Bedford. Then there's India as well. I believe there's a separate team for that going to India. They've had a huge uptake with girls over there wanting to race, which is really interesting. So it'll be interesting to see. But I can't say too much about the assessments and who we've sort of said yes to yet. But it's all exciting. And they'll get a GT4 ride with McLaren in GT Cup next year for whoever wins. So really great prize, and McLaren are heavily invested. Actually, they just signed up their first ever female, didn't they?
For the
Extreme E. Yeah. So really good time for women in the sport, which is obviously for me great to see. But away from that, we've been doing some stuff with Speedworks again, haven't we?
So we've really yesterday, didn't I? Big yesterday. So.
Yeah, well, we're basically now started up our coaching programs that we're doing on the simulator, so that will be incorporated very much with people that we race with, that we run, that kind of thing. So bringing them onto the sim, but even for people that enjoy track days or just want some extra tuition in one way or another, we're really using the sim for all sorts of stuff, aren't we? Which is great. So useful tool. And we've got some exciting kind of partnerships coming up, but we're still not allowed to talk about it yet. So we'll have to hold fire on that
how long these things take sometimes.
To finalise things, but it's for the right reasons. So, there's only so much we can say. So if we move on to road cars, this week. So Honda, first of all.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of talk in the motoring press about new Civic Type R, because we've talked about Civic Type R on here, and that as a mechanical thing, it's fabulous. It's one of the best cars you can buy as a driver's car, but we've always been a bit sort of put off a little bit by the way they look.
For me personally, I find they try a bit hard. I mean, hey, it's each to their own, and I'm sure lots of people disagree with that. But for me personally, I like understated, unless it's a proper sports car or something, you know?
Yeah. So anyway, so in America they're a little bit ahead of us. They've got the new Civic.
Yeah.
And they've got the one that's the next one down from the Type R, which is called the SI, which I don't think we're going to get here, but it gives you an idea of what the Type R might be like.
Yeah.
And Honda are very much an engineering-led company, and they've kind of they've gone back to basics a little bit with this car, which is really quite interesting to see.
Yeah, so
they've toned down the outside for a start.
Absolutely, and also things like they've kept buttons, also analog dials again.
Analog dials,
which I think is great, because I think it's a bit like a fine watch. So if you think of a watch, all the fitness electric watches you get, and then you think of a normal.
Well, Rolex.
I just think it's the same with cars. So all these digital displays, they might be very clever, but there's something that lacks in it.
It's soulless, isn't it?
Yeah, in that kind of refined kind of feeling that you get with a car. I mean, Porsche have always kept an analog rev counter, haven't they? But it's interesting how I think we might go a little bit full circle with some things.
Yes.
And I think, dials, buttons, because I think, haptic buttons can be quite useful, but touchscreen is so difficult on the move, and people just aren't talking to their cars, even though that's what manufacturers want you to do, is press a button and talk to it. That's not really
taken off, has it?
No, people find that really hard, because you also need to understand the language you need to use. It's like when we were Cupra, there's a different word for that.
There was. You had to say Ola.
Yeah, that's
before
it.
You started.
Ola or something, and then it starts to talk to you. But of course, most people have no idea. And so even though it's designed like that, it's just not really working. So I do think we will see it go kind of full circle. But most interestingly is it's much more simple on the outside, isn't it? As well as the inside.
Yeah.
And whether they've decided to go a bit more understated. I mean, the Type R is bound to look a bit more
aggressive. It'll have a big wing on it and that kind of stuff.
Things,
but I think it's been toned down a lot. So it looks like it's going to be pretty cool. So we'll wait and see what that's.
Well, I wonder if they are going to think, like the Golf R and things, actually we want it to be a bit more sophisticated like that.
Yeah.
But still have all the sportiness.
Yeah. High quality materials and all that
stuff.
Yeah.
So we'll have to wait and see. But do we know when the Type R is coming out? I think it is next year.
I think it is next year, yeah.
Actually.
They've stopped making the current one, I think, haven't they?
Yeah, so I think it comes out, I don't know when next year, but 2022. So talking about cars coming out next year, the next one down.
Which we touched on a couple of weeks ago, didn't we?
Yeah.
This is the Porsche, the Cayman GT4 RS.
Yeah, so the Porsche,
which all the dealers kept saying, they're not making one, they're not making one. Because some of my clients have been saying, I want an RS, and their dealers have been saying, they're not making one, and then boom, there it is.
And in fairness, I mean, the dealers can only say what's been confirmed.
They can only tell what they've been officially told you to tell you.
Absolutely, and Porsche keep very much everything, close to their chest until they come to announce something, really. So we get asked all the time, and most of the time we say, to be honest, we know as much as you know, until it comes to announcement.
Because there's still things we don't know, aren't there, really?
Yeah, well, we've seen it go around the ring now, haven't we?
Yeah.
We've seen, I think it was Jorg, wasn't it?
Bergmeister,
who was driving that, which is a great clip, actually, if you want to watch it. Gives you a good just idea of how it sounds, the way it looks. Of course, it looks a lot more aggressive, doesn't it? And it's a lot faster as well, isn't it? That's
it's
the
like
other
getting
thing.
on 30 seconds quicker than the standard car.
Yeah, so that's obviously it's going to be only PDK because all the RSs are. So I think that's what they've said, isn't it? It's going to be PDK. Obviously, that makes a difference on time, but even compared to a PDK 718 Cayman, it's still a lot quicker, isn't it? So but the question is, so they've upgraded the 4-litre flat 6 engine, but they haven't really confirmed whether it's a GT3 engine, so an actual GT engine.
I think that's what people are waiting to find out,
or not, because currently with GT4 it's not one of the GT engines, is it? So I think people aren't sure. I mean, certainly listening to it sounded a lot more like it was a GT3 engine.
And it's revving to 9, isn't it?
Exactly. So I wonder if it is actually a GT3 engine. But we'll have to wait and see, won't we?
Yeah.
But I mean, I think as a driver's car, it's going to be very hard to beat. Mid-engine, super agile, really fast. It's got even more aero on it, hasn't it, than before?
It'll be tricky at the limit though.
Oh, it will.
The normal one is.
Oh yeah. So it's. I mean, in many respects, they're easy to drive until you get right on its tiptoes. And the thing is,
Then
being mid-engine, exactly, they're very, very snappy. Whereas something like a 911. So GT3, for example, actually is a lot more benign in its movements, really.
Yeah.
When it does move, it's a lot more lazy in its movement, to a point, of course.
Yeah.
Whereas you find with the GT4, like we're drifting them, a GT3 is easier to drift than a GT4, isn't it, in many respects?
In a lot of respects.
Yeah.
With Caymans, mid-engine cars, they go and they come back.
Yeah.
Where 911s go a bit more gently, but if you don't get on top of them, they keep going.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
it's just understanding a bit how they think, isn't it?
Absolutely. But no, it'd be really interesting to see this car and drive it. They haven't announced the price yet, have they?
No.
Of course, so when it does come out, it's going to hold
It'll be
its
over
residuals.
100 grand,
so,
won't it, I would think. But
yeah.
they haven't said.
But it's going to be hard for people to get them. It will go up in value, all that kind of thing. But I think it's going to be a serious driver's car. I mean, I love the manual GT4 as it is. So I do think, like, will the character still be there? And I know it's a daft thing to say because with the GT3 RS, I love it as a PDK.
Yeah.
But I've got so used to a GT4 being a manual that when we drive the
Big part of the car,
718...
isn't it?
Personally, when we've driven the 718 version with the PDK and the manual, we've both agreed, haven't we, that manual brings it alive somehow.
It's not the same car, the PDK one.
It's really funny because I love PDK as well, so I'm surprised I'm saying that. But yeah, when genuinely drive both, there's something a bit more magical about the manual, isn't there?
Without doubt,
But hey, the RS is a different animal, so we'll have to wait and see. I'm sure I won't say no to one, that's for sure.
No.
But anyway, so yeah, have a little look online with Jörg Burmeister. He's driven around the ring in it, and yeah, he makes it dance on water anyway. But yeah, have a watch of that and give you a bit of an idea of really what it's about. So the next car is... Well, I had to bring this in because it's an American car.
Yeah.
And I like my American cars.
It's a bit different to your normal American car, though.
It is, to be fair. So the Czinger 21C.
If we've mispronounced that, by the way.
Yeah. Well,
sorry.
Well, I thought it
but
might
it looks
be...
like Czinger to us.
Well, I thought it might be Czinger, but I don't think it is. So it's an American-built supercar, but it's been able to beat the McLaren Senna around the track. So it's a Californian-based company, and they were going to release the car at the 2020 Geneva show, but of course it got cancelled because of the pandemic. So they took the risk to launch it online, and I think, to be honest, that didn't work out for them.
It sounds that
way,
doesn't it?
Because of course, like anybody that released during that time, people just didn't make a big deal of it. I think without seeing it in the flesh, getting up close to it, taking pictures of it, it kind of was under the radar, really.
Yeah.
So they thought, right, how do we get publicity? So they decided to go around some of the biggest American circuits and try and take lap records for a production car, and that's exactly what they've done, isn't it? So,
and quite a long way as well.
Yeah, I was really surprised looking at this, and I thought, oh, this will be brilliant to see. So round Laguna Seca, this 21C did a 125.4, but the Senna did a 127.6.
That's quite a big difference,
so that's
isn't
a massive difference. Then they went to COTA, and Joel Miller was driving, and he did it in 2.11.3. But the previous production record there was 2:17. So again, a massive difference.
Yeah.
And they've said it's unmodified. It's just a production model on Michelin Cup R's. So it's like the Cup 2s, but the R version, which is even more of a semi-slick.
Brilliant tyres.
They are. Like, I'm amazed they're road legal. Let's put it that way. But they are.
But they're a phenomenal track tyre as long as it's not raining.
As long as it's not raining.
I suppose it doesn't rain in Laguna Seca
or
COTA, really.
Not. But what I love, it's mid-engine twin turbo V8, but it's also got 2 electric motors at the front as well, and it produces 1,250 brake horsepower. So what I love about that is it's mid-engine, it's got V8, so it's going to sound awesome, and it's got the electric for the torque, and the power is immense. But also they've managed to keep it light, and we know where we talked about Gordon Murray's T50, saying the importance of the power to weight ratio. Cars are getting too big, too heavy, you need to keep it light. So with this, what is it?
So it's 1,240 kilos and 1,250 horsepower. So it's 1,000 horsepower a ton, basically.
Yeah.
It's a horsepower for every kilo.
which is just brilliant, isn't it? So it's more like what a race car would be. It's a lot more traditional in that sense. So the other bizarre thing, and I didn't even know this was a thing, being honest, is the 21C is a 3D printed car. And apparently that is not that's unheard of with these cars. So that's what they're also famous for. But yeah, so have a little look online at that. I mean, I instantly fell in love with it. It's a bit of a funny looking thing. It's still sexy. It's a supercar. It's still sexy, but It's not as eye-catching as some, let's say. From the pictures I've seen, I've not seen it in the flesh, but as far as a driver's car is concerned, I think this just has all the bits that, I certainly would like in a car, that's for sure. So have a little look at that. So there's loads of road cars to talk about at the moment, but we thought we'd better just go with 3 kind of big things, but also that are quite different as well.
Yes, and we've kind of hit a few markets there, because what we don't want to do is just talk about elite stuff.
Yeah, it's easy to do.
A Czinger is lovely, but whatever, $2.5 million, we're not as many of us are going to buy one, are we?
That's it, because they're only going to release 80 units, and exactly. So we've tried to go with, obviously, the Honda, talking about the Type R, something more accessible, and then you've got the Porsche, GT4 RS, which isn't as accessible to us, but to some
but it's not that far away.
It's not that far away. And then of course, the Czinger, which is probably pretty far away. But an awesome. From what I've seen, an awesome car.
Behind it.
Well, I'm going to write to them anyway, so you might see us test driving one.
Well, you never know. Well, we do want to go to Laguna Seca to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that would be great. So if we move on to driving, then we thought we'd talk about left foot braking, because it's something
Bit
that
of a change,
comes up a lot with clients. Should I be left foot braking? And actually doing these assessments with the girls with Formula Women, quite a few said, do you want me to left foot brake? So I'd say, well, what are you most comfortable with? Oh, my right foot. Okay, well, just use what you're most comfortable with for now. It's something that comes up. So I don't know if you just want to explain a bit about it.
Yeah, so left foot braking is what it says. You've got one foot on the left foot on the brake, right foot on the throttle. So in certain cars, it makes a lot of sense. I've been a left foot brake as long as I've been driving, as have you, because of karting. So for me, I actually prefer to brake with my left foot. But the actual reasons as to why you do it are can be a little bit vague, because there are advantages to it, but then sometimes they're not quite as clear cut as people think they are.
I think most people initially think it makes you faster. That's what people think, isn't it?
Yeah.
And to a degree it could do, but we're talking a minute amount.
It's not huge.
It's not huge.
So but there are advantages to it. For example, you've got one foot for each pedal, so that means you've got 100% focus with your left foot on the brake, and you're not trying to do 2 different things with it. So for your brain, that's actually an easier neural pathway once you've done it, because your left foot is just concentrating on regulating the brakes. So that's one thing. The other thing is the pedal transition. So going from throttle to brake, obviously that takes time. Well, of course, when you do it with your left foot, it's instantaneous, and there's benefits for that.
Well, it's smoother, isn't it, as well?
It's smoother.
There is, in that sense, there is less time between. Okay, we're talking a very small amount, but I think the control and the finesse is much smoother. Having, like you say, 100% focus with both separate feet, I think it definitely, once you get the hang of it, you can see the advantage of that. You
can, because it's like I was saying before about the sensitivity of it, and you can have a slight overlap and things like that. So
that's the other thing.
We talk about introducing things to the car, don't we? And it allows you to do that. So your left foot can be starting to pick the brake up as your right foot's coming off the throttle. So there's that one rolling over the other, and that has a benefit with aero cars, but it also has a benefit with normal road cars, because it's just introducing things, isn't it?
That's something Lewis Hamilton does a lot.
Yeah, you hear him do it, don't you?
A lot. So if you watch on board and listen, quite often there is actually, and it comes up on the data, they've actually started showing a lot more data on Sky F1, so it's definitely worth, if you're into it, watching that graphic. It's really, really interesting. But he actually does a complete overlap. Now, like you say, because it really helps with the car, doesn't it? That doesn't make the car jump for a start. There isn't a clear transition from one to the other. But also it does help control weight transfer, which is a big reason I do it, much more than having a lift off the gas to try and pitch the weight on the front. You can be so much more accurate with the brake pedal, trying to pitch. So you might still be on the gas, but just pitching a bit on the front.
Go to a high and a half.
Absolutely, to just get the front digging in enough, which is a lot more accurate than trying to lift off the gas, because of course you don't want the back to get light either. So in that sense, there's a lot more room for manipulation with the car. But certainly watch Lewis, because it's really quite obvious once you're aware of it. And
the obvious one is rally drivers, because they use the left foot to manipulate the car the whole time, because mid-corner they're trying to get the front to dig in and stuff like that. And people like Michael Schumacher were very good at that. they would use the left foot to make the car understand all kinds of weird things, but he would manipulate the car basically with his left foot,
basically keeping
using
it on
both
its
pedals
tiptoes.
at the same time, which comes from karting and just trying to manipulate
with
stuff
karting,
like that.
one thing I would say, obviously being a karter originally myself, moving to cars, is the transition isn't as easy as you think. So when you first go to cars, the feel of the pedal is so different. With karts, you don't really have to feel the brake pedal. It's very much on or off most of the time. Whereas in a car, that isn't always the case at all. So I did find I still had to train my foot to be a lot more sensitive with how I applied the brake, but also most importantly, how I came off the brake. So how I was trailing the brakes off with my left foot. So that did take a bit of practice, because in karts I didn't have to do that. But it still, of course, helps, because when you've learned to use both feet straight away, you automatically want to use your left foot for a start. So that's helpful, but you still need to train. So if anybody coming out of karts having a go, don't be alarmed if it takes a bit of time to really get super accurate, but don't give up on it, because some drivers then switch and just use their right foot, but then get so used to that they won't use their left. And actually, we were going to say, weren't we, there's some top pro drivers in all kind of categories, that some still right foot brake, and they're unbelievably fast. So that's where the question of is it faster comes in. I'm sure it is, very, very slightly, but I don't think it would make that much difference over a lap if you're good enough, let's say.
But it's a bit like the whole thing of you have to have done karting. You don't have to have done karting. No. It's just that all the best drivers did.
Yeah.
And that isn't so. If you do something as a kid, whether it's driving a tractor like Jim Clark did or riding motorbikes, it's doing something. But of course, anybody who wants to be a Formula 1 driver tends to kart.
Yeah.
So you get the same thing with left foot braking. That the really quick drivers tend to left foot brake.
Yeah.
But one of the famous examples for me was when Peugeot won Le Mans a few years ago. Their quickest driver was Nicolas Manascian, and he's a right foot braker.
Absolutely. I know there's quite a few that are right foot brakers, and it surprises you, because you think, oh, but surely, I mean, it's obviously in Formula 1 now, you have to left foot brake, you can't move your feet across, it's all set up that way. But in some formulas, you still do have people that, if they have the choice, will use their right foot. Yeah. But I think that's because they've done so much of that, they still feel that sensitivity is just that little bit better with their right foot than their left.
Funny enough, with the touring cars of the week, because I can't think, it was Turkington, I think, was a right foot braker, where Ash Sutton's a left foot braker. Yeah. You know, and there's nothing to choose between the two of them, is there?
Absolutely. You know? So I would certainly say, if you want to progress yourself and have it in your toolbox, definitely, I would encourage anybody to really be able to be as good with both feet, ideally. So then you know, depending what you drive, you can use both. You can obviously, if you've only got two pedals, great, use your left foot. But then if you've got a gearbox, you have to heel and toe, then of course you're just as sensitive with your right foot. So I think, the more tools in your box, the better. But there's no point putting pressure on yourself, like I saw with this situation with being assessed, when you haven't done much of it, because it takes a long time to really get that muscle memory developed. And we were testing in normal road cars that were electric as well, so they're very sensitive on the brake. You don't get much feel through the brake pedal, so you have to have really good feel through your foot. So if it's that, just give yourself more time, and over time you will get more and more sensitive to it. So I think it's a great thing to have. But it's not the be all and end all like some people make out, let's say. Unless you want to be a Formula 1 driver, then you need to do it. But anyway, so have a go. Well, if you do have a go on the road, let's say you've got an auto and you want to give it a go, be really careful where you do it first of all, okay? And make sure there's nobody around you. I know that sounds daft, but if you've used it only as a clutch foot before and you want to give it a go, you'll be surprised how you won't have any feel with your left foot at all to begin with, will you?
It's funny, I read an article the other day about the fastest stopping production road cars, which we'll talk about another time. But one guy put in the comments that nothing stopped as quick as his car when he tried left foot braking.
Oh, it happened the amount of times, and you've had it, I've had it, where I sat with somebody and they've got confused because they drive a manual and they're suddenly driving an auto and they use their left foot and slam the brake on, and it's
because your left foot's on a mission for the floor.
Exactly.
That's what you do.
Exactly, because it's used to being a clutch foot, and it's funny, isn't it, how suddenly, and people don't get it, they suddenly come to a screeching halt and they can't work out what's going on, and it's amazing how you really do have to develop that muscle memory. But you can do it quicker than you think. You just have to persevere a little bit. But definitely give yourself some room. Do it somewhere really quiet and take your time. with it, that's for sure, especially in a road car, I think. But anyway, so we'll move on to motorsport, our favourite subject of all.
Absolutely, yeah.
Save the best till last. So Mexico Grand Prix this weekend, isn't it?
Yeah, so we've watched, there's been a couple of practice sessions, another one on in a minute.
And we've got the qualifying later, haven't we?
Qualifying tonight, yes.
So so Max is, 12 points ahead?
12 points ahead.
There's a lot of focus on Perez and Red Bull this weekend because, of course, Perez is from Mexico. So they were asking about team orders. So if Perez was quicker this weekend or got a chance, would there be team orders? And Red Bull have pretty much admitted, yes, there would be. We can't jeopardise the chance of Max winning the championship for Checo for the race, even though I'm sure if it wasn't going to be the case like that, then they would let Checo have the victory.
You might find his radio doesn't work.
Yeah, that, do you know what, Damon Hill, they asked Damon Hill, what would you have done, back if this was at Silverstone, back in your day, would you, if this was your chance for your first win? And he said, yeah, I'd pretend the radio was broken and I would go for it, because I think you still have that, especially as it's so hard to get a win, isn't it, in Formula One? You have to be in the right car at the right time. And then, of course, you've got your teammate as well to beat. So, of course, there's a lot of people rooting for Perez. But Red Bull do have a bit of a headache there with, obviously, Max being the championship rival at the moment.
We'll see.
Yeah. So, how was the free practice then?
Well, I mean, this is what they were saying about that. They reckon the altitude suits the Honda engine, but the straight at Mexico is like a mile. It goes on forever, the straight does. And of course, Merck
it's only about 2 point something miles, isn't it?
Yeah, but if you look at the map of it, all one side of it is straight, a bit like Le Mans.
Yeah.
And it's just a big, long straight. But of course, the Merck have got this trick suspension where it's quicker down the straight. But
what does it do? It
stalls the rear diffuser.
That was the word I was looking for. It stalls the rear diffuser. Absolutely.
And in practice, that showed out to be true. The Merc was quicker down the straight, but then around the rest, because then it's all corners. Then back to the pit straight again.
Yeah.
And Max was pulling half a second on them, but you never know. As Merc sandbagging you just don't know, do you, where everybody's at.
I think
it's pretty close.
I still think Merc have quite a bit in the bag, to be honest. Watching, we've got another free practice to watch, but the two I've watched so far, I get that impression that they are holding back a little bit because of this talk of the suspension. That said, I mean, Bottas has been driving brilliantly.
Oh,
he's very good with these kind of dusty, sandy tracks. And I
don't know
if that's
a lot
been
of use to Mexico.
No, exactly. And they were saying the dirt on it is just horrendous. But if you think of all the tracks that have been dirty this year, Bottas has been absolutely on it.
Yeah, it's been finished.
But he's also driving so much better now, isn't he? Now it sounds awful, but been dropped from Mercedes and he's moving to Alpha. He is so much happier, which would be really interesting to see what comes out once he's moved. I mean, a lot of racing drivers and ex-racing drivers are saying, actually, there's been a lot going on behind the scenes that we don't know about, and it will all come out in the wash, basically.
I'm sure it will.
A bit like when Mark Webber left, and there's been so many times. So it'd be interesting to see, but he seems mentally so much stronger. He seems happier. He has been getting like a psychologist coaching, performance coaching, to help him, whether that's also part of it. I'm sure it is. But he's suddenly a different man, isn't he, behind the wheel? So it'd be interesting to see what he can do this weekend. Obviously, there would be team orders, I'm sure, if he was quicker, because, of course, it's so tight for Lewis at the moment. So he's only won, 5 Grand Prix so far. Yeah. Max has won 7.
Well, Valtteri's leaving. He might have radio trouble as well.
Exactly, yeah. I'm sure he won't mind.
It's affecting these radios.
Yeah, exactly. But what about Max then? I mean, he looked like he was absolutely in the zone.
Yeah, the car looked awesome. Martin Brundle did a thing where he stood at, I think he's turn 9, and some of the cars coming through there looked like the 70s. They were four-wheel drifting all the way through, but the Red Bull was on rails.
Yeah, because you said about the Alpines were all over the place.
A mess.
I really had to work hard. But you're right, the Red Bulls, just how they rode the curves were just beautiful.
It just didn't bother the car at all, did it? Like a Cadillac going across the curves.
Yeah, that's the only time you want it to be like a Cadillac.
That's right.
I would have thought, but so that will be interesting. I think it's going to be super close between Merck and Red Bull for sure.
Yeah.
If we go on to McLaren though, they've sort of lost a bit of their pace, haven't they?
Because
somewhere
almost as exciting as the one at the front is the McLaren Ferrari battle, isn't it?
Yeah,
because they're trying to get third in the Constructors' Championship. But McLaren just haven't shown up yet, I don't think.
Well, it's like they've started off on fire. I mean, at the start of the season, they're gradually just the last couple of races sort of starting to lose their edge.
Well, it was
and
quite
I don't know
good at
if
COTA, wasn't it? They're quite a good race at COTA with Ferrari, but then this week, they're right down the bottom.
But what I mean is they were ahead of Ferrari, and now it's like suddenly I don't know if Ferrari's caught up. I mean, I've said it many times. I think Ferrari probably have one of the strongest driver lineups with Sainz.
Probably followed by McLaren,
Leclerc.
to be fair. With Ricciardo and Norris.
And I think the Ferrari drivers are dragging that car up there well and truly. But there's just been a change, hasn't there? So I think that'll be interesting to see really what happens. Do you tell us about Andretti then?
Well, I was a bit disappointed by that.
Really.
Yeah, so Michael Andretti wants to. He's a businessman. He wants to expand his team, and they're doing really well over there in the States. And they run sports cars and Indy cars, Indy Lights cars as well, which we'll talk about in a second. And he's wanted to get F1 is unfinished business for him. I know his dad was world champion and he came over for a year, so he's been trying to buy an F1 team, and he got to the 11th hour. Of buying Sauber Alfa Romeo, and then pulled out because basically I think Sauber wanted them to buy the team but not run it, and they were like, well, why would I do that? And it was going to be brilliant because he was going to take Colton Herta, who we've talked about a lot on this podcast. He was going to take Colton Herta and stick him in with Valtteri.
Absolutely,
think,
because an American in Formula One.
Herta,
he is. He's what, 21? Is that
something
right?
like that, 2021.
Young lad and absolutely on fire in the Indy cars. Really, really naturally fast. But hey, they haven't said it's out of the question to buy a team.
No,
they just said this isn't the right deal, which I get, because why invest all the money and not be able to run it and put your mark on it, which does make sense. So hopefully they will come over. I think it'd be great to get more of a connection between IndyCar and Formula One again, like we used to have in the past, in the history of the sport, and that's certainly starting to happen, isn't it?
It is, and people like Asia Newey, that started IndyCars. They went and engineered IndyCars before they came to F1 and stuff.
Absolutely.
The connection's always been there.
Well, if you think Grosjean's gone over, Ericsson, and actually, if we move on to the IndyCar testing, Hülkenberg was over there, wasn't he?
He was, and I think it was a bit of an eye opener for him because the cars are hard.
Yeah, they're a lot more old school. Aren't they? A lot
very
more old
heavy,
school.
All that stuff. And he was the slowest.
Yeah.
And I think that came as a bit of a surprise to him. And I think, but they've all got experience. But quickest was the Indy Lights champion.
Yeah, but I suppose he has experience of those tracks, that sort of style, I guess. But,
I guess so.
So Kyle Kirkwood, his name is, isn't he?
Kyle Kirkwood,
Yeah, so he won the Indy Lights.
Yes, and he's one of them that's come up through all the scholarships.
I was going to say, so he doesn't come from money.
No.
But this is what's great with scholarship. I wish they'd do more of this in the UK and Europe, because it just means the right drivers really have a chance of getting there, let's say. Not just the wealthiest. So from winning the Indy Lights Championship, he got 1.25 million, didn't he? As a prize, and then he's guaranteed 3 entries for IndyCar, isn't he?
Yes.
So what is it?
St. Petersburg, and the Indy Grand Prix, and the Indy 500. So
which
he gets
is
those entries.
Brilliant. But of course, so the official IndyCar test, and he was fastest.
He was the fastest,
which they must have been blown away with.
Absolutely. And again, Andretti, so he won Indy Lights for Andretti, but Andretti had no room. And I thought that was all ties back to the Alpha thing, where Andretti were going to move Colton Herta to the States, put Kyle Kirkwood in his car.
Yeah.
But now they can't do that. So they'll get him back at some point, I've no doubt. But...
So do you think... But has Kyle Kirkwood got a seat for this
Not
year?
Yet.
Or sorry, next year? That's such. But surely they must want
Somebody
to.
Will.
Because that, I mean, has that happened before? Have we had an Indy Lights champion come in on the first test and be the quickest?
I don't know, to be honest. So you think Indy Lights champions, Colton Herta, Pato O'Ward, Oliver Askew, all Indy Lights champions. They've all come in and set the world alight in IndyCar, haven't they? So it obviously works.
Absolutely.
But it's where does he go?
Yeah, but what I love, again, is that it's a scholarship. So it does reward the right drivers. So he doesn't come from money, yet hopefully he's going to have a chance of a work seat in IndyCar. And boy, does he deserve it. So, we'll have to watch that space, that's for sure. But it'd be interesting to see. I'd love to see Colton Herta over in an F1 car. There's always this question, isn't there, of... is IndyCar drivers as good as F1 drivers and vice versa?
Well, Pato's doing the last test, isn't he, for McLaren?
Yeah, and that I just think all of that's just fascinating because that stops anybody doubting anything.
Yeah.
I mean, I think IndyCar is brutal, absolutely brutal, and I think anybody who goes from Formula 1 to IndyCar doesn't have an easy time at all.
No.
But it'd be interesting to see it both ways, let's say. So we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
So our interactive question for the week,
Yes.
So I'm actually going to put some stuff on the social media channels as well with some options, because there's quite a few cars coming out in 2022. So if something doesn't come to mind, don't worry, I'm going to put it online so you can answer on there as well. But the question is, what car are you most excited about for 2022?
Okay.
What would you say?
Well,
I kind of thought I knew your answer, but go on.
well, I think probably the Civic Type R.
Oh,
to be
okay.
honest
That
with
was
you. Is that what you thought I was going to say?
No.
Just to think if they do it right, then it'll be a brilliant car. Because at the moment the recipe's nearly
all
there.
the cars of 2022.
It's just good. I can see myself getting one. I
That's
can't
what
see
you're
myself
gonna-
having a good a T50.
Oh, man.
But I just think if Honda get that right and make it more like the build quality of the Golf,
Yeah.
but keep the ingredients of the Type R, that'll
Yeah.
be unbeatable, that car.
Okay. If
So
you
that's
say
my
so.
answer. That's my answer.
So I'm going to be really boring and say the Gordon Murray T50.
There you go.
Because I love the theory of it. Gordon Murray, I know we've said it before, but built the McLaren F1. He's been an F1 engineer, for years, wasn't he? He's
Well,
just
he was the Brabham designer and then he was the McLaren designer.
yeah. Sorry, designer, not engineer. And I just think he really is about keeping it old school, traditional. Very light, very simple, manual.
If we could, he'd be a good bloke to get on the pod.
Oh,
If
yeah.
you ever listen to an interview with him, he's a fascinating man. The stuff, the way his brain works, on mine like a planet, like these guys have.
Yeah, and when we were lucky enough to see this car in action at Millbrook, weren't we?
Frank
Under
Kitty
wraps.
driving
Yeah, so it's not officially out yet, but Frank Kitty was testing it, and I don't think I've ever heard a road production car sound like that car.
Proper noise.
It reminds
I mean,
me
we've
of
heard the
old...
Valkyrie a lot, haven't we? But
Yeah,
that,
but the Valkyrie sounds wonderful, but
Yeah.
it's not. This sounds like an old F1 car. It
Yeah.
has that pitch and that ring to it, where you just, wherever you are on site, it just makes you smile. It's
Yeah.
just one of those. So for me, it would have to be that. But what I'm going to do is on the social media, I'll put a few options down so people are aware of what's actually coming out next year. And yeah, let us know. And obviously it doesn't have to be one of those options. If you think of something else, let us know. It'd be always interesting to hear what people are looking forward to and why. So yeah, please get in touch. So next week, well, we've actually got some people confirmed now, some guests. We were just, like we said before, waiting to the winter really, because there's so much motorsport to cover anyway. And these guys and girls are very, very busy. So we thought we'd wait. So we've got Jack Harvey coming on very soon. So he's moving teams, isn't he? So he's going to talk to us
the
all.
longest IndyCar name in the world, Ray Hall, Letterman, Lanigan.
Yeah.
Racing.
So Jack Harvey, I
RLL.
used to race with Jack in karts. He did foundation steps. He did mostly European categories over here, but never really had the money. Went over to America and he's made it an IndyCar. And he's been brilliant to watch, hasn't he, this year? In a very small team, and he's made a lot of heads turn. So it'd be really interesting to sort of hear his story with IndyCar, how he's found it and what he thinks going forwards. Also, we're going to have Harry King on, so to talk about kind of his year this year compared to last year. Also, really about the Porsche Super Cup compared to the Carrera Cup GP, because he's been doing both. And we've got a few others, but we won't bore you with that yet. But we've got quite a few confirmed, we'll launch those on social media with the dates very shortly. Okay, so I think that's it, really.
That's it. Yeah, lovely job.
Right. Okay, guys, speak to you soon.
See you next week. Bye.